Your bank account right now, at this exact moment, is not a measure of your intelligence. It's not a reflection of your potential. It's not even about the opportunities you've been given or denied. Your bank account is something far more precise, far more revealing. It is a mathematical record of every decision you've made in the last decade, every morning routine, every impulse you resisted or surrendered to, every hour you invested in learning or wasted scrolling. The number in your account is a mirror, and what it reflects is not your worth as a person, it reflects your habits. And here's what the ultra-wealthy know that most people will never understand. Habits aren't just behaviors, they're identity, they're neural architecture. They're the invisible compound interest that either builds empires or guarantees mediocrity. In the next 30 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how billionaires architect their days differently, why your brain is either wired for wealth or poverty, and the specific micro-habits that separate seven-figure net worths from seven-figure debt. This isn't motivation. This is mechanism. My name is William Vanderbilt, and I've spent 2 decades studying the behavioral patterns of the ultra-wealthy. Not what they say in interviews, but what they actually do when no one's watching. And what I've discovered will fundamentally change how you see every decision you make today. Because today's decisions aren't just today's decisions. They're deposits into the compound account of your future net worth. Before we go further, I need you to do something right now. This is a new channel, and we're building something powerful here. A community that doesn't just dream about wealth, but understands the architecture of it. We're pushing toward 100 subscribers, and I need you to be part of that foundation. Hit that subscribe button right now, not later. Now. Because what I'm about to reveal in this video and the ones coming after it represents insider knowledge that most financial channels won't touch. And here's the truth. If you're not subscribed, you'll miss the strategies I'm dropping next week on tax optimization. The wealthy use to legally keep millions. Second, hit that like button. We're aiming for 50 likes on this video because the algorithm rewards engagement, and engagement means more people discover this channel, which means you get access to even deeper insights as we grow. If you're serious about rewiring your financial future, these 2 actions, subscribe and like, are your entry fee. Now let's get into the real work. Let me tell you about 2 men. Both graduated from the same Ivy League MBA program in 1995. Both landed high-paying positions at consulting firms. Both earned identical starting salaries of $85,000. 30 years later, one has a net worth of $47 million. The other has a net worth of negative $200,000, underwater on a mortgage, drowning in credit card debt, financing a lifestyle that looks successful but is financially catastrophic. What happened? The difference wasn't intelligence. It wasn't opportunity. It wasn't even luck. The difference was 5 daily habits. Just 5. But those 5 habits, repeated for 10,000 days, created a $47 million gap. The first man, let's call him Michael, had a simple morning routine. He woke at 6:15 every morning. Not because he loved mornings, but because he decided that the first hour of his day would belong to him, not to email, not to emergencies, not to other people's agendas. In that first hour, he did 3 things. He worked out for 30 minutes, not to look good, but because he understood that cognitive performance depends on cardiovascular health. Then he spent 15 minutes reviewing his net worth spreadsheet, every asset, every liability, every investment. He didn't just glance at it, he studied it. He asked himself, what went up? What went down? Why? What does this tell me about my decisions? Then he spent 15 minutes reading. Not news, not social media, but books on business strategy, behavioral economics, and market history. That's it. 90 minutes. But here's what happened in his brain during those 90 minutes. His basal ganglia, the deep brain structures that control habit formation, were being rewired. Every morning, his neural pathways were reinforcing 3 identities. I am someone who protects my health. I am someone who knows my financial position. I am someone who continuously learns. After 1 year, these habits felt automatic. After 5 years, they felt effortless. After 10 years, they were so deeply embedded in his identity that not doing them would feel like betraying himself. The second man, call him David, also had a morning routine. He hit snooze 3 times, woke up stressed, checked his phone immediately, scrolled through news and social media for 20 minutes while still in bed, then rushed to shower and get to work. By the time he arrived at the office, he'd already made 40 micro-decisions, each one depleting his willpower, each one consuming cognitive resources he'd need for important choices later. His brain was being rewired too, but toward reactivity, toward external validation, toward passive consumption. After 1 year, these habits felt automatic. After 5 years, they felt effortless. After 10 years, they were so deeply embedded in his identity that changing them would require confronting who he'd become. Here's what most people miss. Both men were working equally hard at their jobs. Both were putting in 60-hour weeks. Both were ambitious. But Michael was building wealth through habit architecture that operated outside his work hours. David was consuming his potential through habit architecture that operated outside his work hours. The 90 minutes before work, that's 657 hours per year. Over 30 years, that's 19,700 hours. Michael spent those hours building assets, physical health that prevented medical costs and maintained energy, financial awareness that caught problems early and opportunities earlier, and knowledge that compounded into better career moves and investment decisions. David spent those hours maintaining the status quo at best, sliding backward at worst. By year 10, Michael's net worth hit 1.2 million. He wasn't earning dramatically more than David, maybe 20% more due to slightly better career decisions enabled by his reading habit, but he was saving 30% of his income, while David was saving 8%. Michael's investment returns averaged 9% because he understood market cycles from his daily reading. David's returns averaged 4% because he panic sold during downturns and chased hot stocks during bubbles. The gap wasn't dramatic in any single year. It was invisible, but compounding never sleeps. By year 20, Michael's net worth hit 8 million. David's hit 300,000, which sounds respectable until you realize he was earning 200,000 per year by then. He should have been worth 3 million minimum. Where did it go? Lifestyle inflation. As his income grew, so did his house, his cars, his vacations, his country club membership, his private school tuition. Every raise became a permission slip for new spending. His identity shifted from building wealth to looking wealthy. And looking wealthy is expensive. Being wealthy is often invisible. By year 30, Michael hit 47 million. His income had grown to 400,000 annually, but his spending had grown to only 150,000. The gap, 250,000 per year, flowed into investments that had been compounding for decades. David hit negative 200,000. His income had grown to 350,000, but his spending had grown to 400,000. The gap was financed by home equity lines and credit cards. He looked successful. He was financially drowning. The tragedy isn't that David failed. The tragedy is that David never saw the mechanism. He thought wealth was about income. It's not. It's about the habits that determine what you do with income. And those habits operate in the 90 minutes before work, the 30 minutes after work, the weekend choices, the micro-decisions that feel insignificant but compound into everything. Now I know what you're thinking. This sounds like another self-help story about discipline and delayed gratification. It's not. What I'm describing is neuroscience. And understanding the neuroscience changes everything, because you stop fighting yourself and start redirecting yourself. Let me explain exactly what's happening in your brain when you repeat a financial habit. Every time you make a decision, to track your expenses, to skip an impulse purchase, to invest consistently, your brain creates a neural pathway. Think of it like a hiking trail through a forest. The first time you make that decision, you're bushwhacking through dense undergrowth. It's hard. It requires conscious effort and willpower. But the second time, there's a faint path. The third time, the path is clearer. By the 100th time, you've created a well-worn trail that's easy to follow. By the 1000th time, you've created a highway. The behavior has become automatic. This process is called neuroplasticity, and it's not a metaphor. It's a physical restructuring of your brain tissue. The basal ganglia, deep structures in your brain, are responsible for this. They take behaviors that initially require prefrontal cortex processing, that's conscious, effortful thinking, and convert them into automatic patterns that run without conscious thought. This is why wealthy people often say their financial habits feel effortless. It's not because they have superhuman discipline, it's because they've repeated the behavior enough times that it's been transferred from the energy-expensive prefrontal cortex to the energy-efficient basal ganglia. But here's the critical insight. This rewiring happens whether your habits are constructive or destructive. If you check your phone 40 times per day, you're creating a neural superhighway for distraction and dopamine-seeking behavior. If you spend 30 minutes daily scrolling through social media, you're rewiring your brain for passive consumption and comparison anxiety. If you make impulsive purchases when stressed, you're creating an automatic link between negative emotion and spending, a link that will activate without conscious thought during your next stressful period. The neurotransmitter driving this process is dopamine. Most people think dopamine is about pleasure, but that's not quite right. Dopamine is about motivation and anticipation. When you engage in a behavior and receive a reward, even a small one, like the satisfaction of checking off a task or the brief pleasure of a purchase, your brain releases dopamine. That dopamine strengthens the neural pathway that led to the behavior. Your brain essentially marks that pathway as worth repeating. Do it enough times, and the pathway becomes a highway. The behavior becomes automatic. This is beautiful when the behavior is wealth-building. It's catastrophic when the behavior is wealth-destroying. Warren Buffett, at a net worth exceeding $120 billion, lives in the same house in Omaha that he bought in 1958 for $31,500. Think about that. He could buy a different mansion in a different country for every day of the year. He could live in palaces. He doesn't. Why? Because his brain has been wired for 67 years with a specific identity. I am a disciplined, frugal investor. Spending lavishly would create cognitive dissonance, a conflict between his behavior and his identity. It would feel wrong, not morally wrong, but psychologically wrong, like wearing someone else's clothes. His frugality isn't discipline, it's identity. And identity, once established through repeated behavior, is self-reinforcing. This is the mechanism the wealthy understand. You don't build wealth by fighting your habits. You build wealth by building the right habits, repeating them until they rewire your brain, and allowing your rewired brain to make wealth-building decisions automatically. The willpower is front-loaded, the returns are back-loaded. Most people quit during the front-loaded phase because they don't understand they're literally building new neural architecture, and that process takes time. Let me show you exactly how powerful micro-habits become when you understand compound mathematics. Most people overestimate what they can accomplish in 1 year, but catastrophically underestimate what they can accomplish in a decade through small, consistent improvements. James Clear's research on habit formation demonstrates that a 1% daily improvement compounds to 37 times better results after 1 year. Not 37% better, 37 times better. Over 5 years, the compounding becomes almost incomprehensible. Here's a concrete example that will change how you see every small financial decision. Let's say you save an extra $50 per month. That's $1.67 per day. That's less than the cost of a coffee. It feels insignificant. It feels like it doesn't matter. But invested at a 7% return, which is the historical average of diversified index funds, that $50 per month generates $1.2 million over 30 years. Read that again. $50 per month, $1.2 million. That's not a trick, that's compound interest, the eighth wonder of the world, according to Einstein, though he probably never said that. But the math is real regardless. Now let's add one more layer. Let's say you increase your savings rate by just 1% annually. Not 10%, not a dramatic overhaul. 1%. Maybe you get a raise, and instead of upgrading your car, you increase your monthly investment by $15. The 30-year outcome doesn't just increase, it more than doubles. Why? Because you're compounding the compounding. The larger contributions in later years benefit from fewer years of growth, but the early years' larger contributions benefit from more years. The mathematics aren't linear, they're exponential. But here's where it gets truly transformative. Let's say you also invest 1 hour per week learning about investing, understanding asset allocation, tax optimization, fee minimization. That's 52 hours per year. Over 10 years, that's 520 hours of financial education. That education allows you to increase your returns from 7% to 9% through better decisions, avoiding high-fee funds, tax loss harvesting, rebalancing systematically. What happens to your 30-year outcome? It doesn't increase by 2%, it increases by millions, because that 2% difference compounds over 30 years. The hour-per-week learning habit generates more wealth than working overtime at your job. This is what I call behavioral ROI, return on your time investment. And it's the secret that separates people who build wealth from people who earn income but stay broke. Warren Buffett understands behavioral ROI better than anyone alive. He spends approximately 5 to 6 hours daily reading financial reports, annual letters, and business analysis. Not because it directly generates income, he doesn't get paid by the hour to read. But because this habit produces outsized returns in decision quality, he reads approximately 500 pages per day. Not novels, not news, financial documents and business analysis. This single habit, reading with purpose, has generated hundreds of billions in wealth creation for Berkshire Hathaway. The time invested in reading compounds into pattern recognition, which compounds into better capital allocation, which compounds into superior returns. Most people see Buffett's reading habit and think, I don't have time for that. But they have time for 3 hours of television nightly, 2 hours of social media scrolling, and 1 hour of random web browsing. That's 6 hours. Buffett's reading is 5 hours. The difference isn't time availability, it's priority architecture. Buffett has structured his identity around learning so reading feels natural. Most people have structured their identity around entertainment, so learning feels like work. This brings us to the billionaire case studies that reveal exactly how wealth is built through daily habit architecture. These aren't motivational stories, they're blueprints. Let's start with the man who's been the richest person on earth multiple times, whose daily routine reveals that extreme wealth is built on extreme consistency, not complexity. Warren Buffett wakes at 6:45 a.m. after 8 hours of sleep. Not 7 hours, not 6. 8. This is a discipline that most high performers neglect. Yet scientific research is unambiguous. Sleep deprivation destroys executive function, impulse control, and strategic thinking. The National Sleep Foundation's research shows that sleeping less than 7 hours impairs cognitive performance, equivalent to being legally drunk. Buffett protects his sleep because he understands that his competitive advantage is decision quality. And decision quality requires a well-rested prefrontal cortex. His morning routine includes breakfast, usually McDonald's, which he chooses based on market conditions, spending exactly $2.61, $2.95, or $3.17, depending on how he feels about the market that day. This isn't frugality theater. It's a psychological anchor. He's training his brain to see market conditions, not to mindlessly execute routines. After breakfast, Buffett goes to his office. It's a plain office. No Bloomberg terminals, no trading screens, no CNBC blaring in the background. Just books, newspapers, and silence. This environmental architecture is deliberate. The financial media is designed to trigger emotional responses: fear, greed, urgency. Buffett's office is designed to trigger analytical thinking. He spends hours reading annual reports from companies he owns and companies he's studying. He reads competitor analysis. He reads industry journals. He's not looking for hot tips. He's building mental models of how businesses work, how industries evolve, how management teams think. His afternoons often include bridge, a card game he plays online for hours. Most people see this as leisure. Buffett sees it as deliberate practice of strategic thinking. Bridge requires probability calculation, incomplete information assessment, and predicting opponent behavior based on limited signals. These are the exact cognitive skills required for investing. He's not relaxing, he's training, and he's been doing it for 60 years, which means his brain's pattern recognition circuits for strategic thinking are more developed than almost any human alive. The hidden habit underlying all of Buffett's wealth is his refusal of lifestyle inflation. His 67-year-old house represents a profound psychological insight. Increasing complexity fragments attention. When you buy a second home, you now have 2 properties to maintain, 2 sets of utility bills to track, 2 locations to secure, 2 places pulling your attention. When you upgrade to a luxury car, you now worry about door dings, premium maintenance, and theft. Every lifestyle upgrade creates new complexity, new decisions, new attention drains. Buffett deliberately keeps life simple to preserve cognitive resources for the only thing that matters to him: analyzing businesses and allocating capital. This is micro-habit architecture at the highest level. Most people do the opposite. As income rises, they add complexity. Bigger house means more rooms to furnish, more space to maintain, higher utility costs, increased property taxes. Luxury car means premium insurance, specialized maintenance, constant worry about depreciation. Country club membership means social obligations, time commitments, and pressure to reciprocate invitations. Each addition feels like a reward for success, but each addition is actually a tax on attention and a drain on capital that could be compounding. Buffett avoided this trap entirely by establishing his lifestyle in his 20s and refusing to inflate it, despite becoming one of the wealthiest humans in history. Now let's look at Bill Gates, whose evolution reveals something critical about wealth building at different life stages. Early Gates was obsessed. He pulled all-nighters. He survived on caffeine and pizza. He barely slept. He famously memorized employees' license plates to track who was working late. This extreme intensity built Microsoft, but Gates would later recognize it was unsustainable and, more importantly, suboptimal. As he aged and as neuroscience advanced, he completely restructured his habits based on evidence about cognitive performance. Modern Gates, now 80 years old, prioritizes 7 hours of quality sleep. He works out most mornings, not for vanity, but because cardiovascular exercise increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein that supports neuron growth and cognitive function. He reads voraciously, approximately 50 books per year, and takes detailed notes. His reading isn't casual. It's systematic. He selects books that challenge his assumptions, expose him to new fields, and force him to think about problems outside his expertise. He credits reading as the main way I learn new things and test my understanding. But the real Gates habit that demonstrates wealth psychology is his annual Think Week. Twice per year, he completely disconnects from Microsoft operations, from family, from all obligations, and retreats to a cabin with nothing but books and his thoughts. For 1 week, he does nothing but read and think. No phone calls, no meetings, no email, just deep thinking about complex problems. Most executives would consider this impossible. How can you abandon your company for a week? But Gates recognized that his highest value contribution wasn't attending meetings or answering emails. It was generating strategic insights that could steer the company for years. Think Week produced many of Microsoft's most important strategic decisions, including the pivot to Internet services in the 1990s. This habit reveals a profound truth about wealth creation. Your highest value activity is often not your busiest activity. Gates's Think Week produced more value than months of operational management, but it required the discipline to appear unproductive, to spend a week reading and thinking while others worked on urgent tasks. Most people can't tolerate this. Their identity is tied to being busy, to appearing productive. Gates's identity is tied to generating insights, which requires space that busyness destroys. Now let's examine Elon Musk, whose habit architecture is radically different but equally revealing. Musk works 80 to 100 hours per week across multiple companies. Most people hear that and think, I could never do that. But the real habit isn't working long hours. It's extreme compartmentalization of attention. Musk structures his entire day in 5-minute time blocks, not hour blocks, 5-minute blocks. Monday might be SpaceX engineering from 8 a.m. to noon in 5-minute segments. Then Tesla design from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. in 5-minute segments. Then X operations from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. in 5-minute segments. This isn't productivity theater. This is a deliberate architecture to prevent context switching, which neuroscience research shows destroys deep thinking. When you switch from email to a report, to a meeting, to a phone call, each switch incurs a cognitive cost called attention residue. Part of your attention remains stuck on the previous task, which means you never reach full cognitive capacity on the current task. Musk's 5-minute blocks eliminate this. When he's in SpaceX mode, he's fully in SpaceX mode. When he shifts to Tesla, he fully shifts. The boundaries are explicit, which paradoxically allows deeper focus within each boundary. Musk's morning routine reveals another wealth-building habit: optimization of biological constraints. He wakes at 7 a.m. and immediately showers, a habit he credits with having the biggest positive effect on my daily life. Why? Because hot showers increase core body temperature, which then drops, signaling wakefulness. It's biological hacking, using temperature regulation to jumpstart alertness without relying on caffeine, which creates afternoon crashes. He typically skips breakfast or eats during meetings, not because he doesn't value food, but because eating triggers blood flow to digestion, which reduces blood flow to the brain. He's protecting cognitive resources for first principles problem solving. Most people hear Musk's routine and think it sounds miserable, and maybe it is, by conventional standards. But Musk's identity isn't someone who enjoys life. It's someone who solves impossible problems. His habits perfectly align with that identity. This is the critical insight. Wealth-building habits aren't universally enjoyable. They're identity-aligned. Musk's habits would be torture for someone who identifies as someone who values work-life balance. But they're energizing for someone who identifies as someone building the future. The habits don't create the identity enables the habits. Jeff Bezos offers a completely different model, one focused on decision quality over decision quantity. Bezos wakes naturally without alarms around 6:30 a.m. He deliberately avoids checking his phone for the first hour. Instead, he connects with his partner, drinks coffee slowly and reads the newspaper without rushing. This isn't indulgence. This is strategic protection of peak cognitive hours. Bezos has said repeatedly that he makes better decisions when he's rested, unhurried, and emotionally stable. He schedules his most mentally demanding meetings for 10 a.m., not 8 a.m., not afternoon, but 10 a.m. specifically. Why? Because research on circadian rhythms shows that peak cognitive function occurs approximately 3 to 4 hours after waking. At 6:30 wake-up, that's 9:30 to 10:30 a.m. Bezos protects that window for his highest-stakes decisions. Operational meetings happen later. Easy decisions happen later, but capital allocation, leadership appointments, strategic direction, those happen at 10 a.m. when his prefrontal cortex is at peak performance. By 5 p.m., Bezos has a hard stop on major decisions. He explicitly refuses to use his declining cognitive resources for high-stakes choices. If something important comes up after 5 p.m., it waits until tomorrow's 10 a.m. slot. This discipline is harder than it sounds. Most executives feel pressure to make decisions quickly, to appear decisive, to keep things moving. Bezos resists that pressure because he knows that a good decision tomorrow is better than a mediocre decision today. Amazon's trillion-dollar market cap partly results from this single habit, making fewer but dramatically higher quality decisions by working within biological circadian rhythms rather than against them. This reveals something wealthy people understand viscerally: decision quality beats decision quantity. Most people make hundreds of decisions daily without considering whether those decisions matter. Wealthy people ruthlessly eliminate unimportant decisions to preserve cognitive resources for important ones. Steve Jobs wore the same outfit daily, not because he lacked fashion sense, but because choosing an outfit is a decision, and decisions deplete willpower. Mark Zuckerberg does the same. Obama did the same during his presidency. They're not being quirky. They're practicing decision minimalism, eliminating trivial decisions to preserve capacity for consequential ones. Oprah Winfrey's habits reveal yet another model, one focused on intention over optimization. Oprah wakes naturally between 6:02 and 6:20 a.m. Notice the specificity, not around 6 but between 6:02 and 6:20. This suggests she's paying attention to her body's rhythms rather than forcing herself awake at an arbitrary time. Her first activity is taking 5 dogs outside, forced nature exposure and movement, both of which neuroscience shows improve mood and cognitive function. Then she reads from her 365 Gathered Truths box, a practice of intentional reflection. Then meditation, then workout. Notice what's missing. Checking email, checking phone, checking news. Her first 2 hours belong to her, not to external demands. But here's the radical part. Oprah explicitly does not use to-do lists. Most productivity advice says you need lists, you need planning, you need structure. Oprah's approach is the opposite. She prioritizes intention setting through meditation and spiritual reflection. She asks not, "What do I need to do today?" but, "What kind of person do I want to be today?" This shifts decision-making from task completion to identity alignment. Tasks serve identity rather than identity-serving tasks. Her $2.5 billion net worth reflects a habit that most wealth builders ignore. Deliberate boundary setting. She caps business affairs at 2 hours daily, a radical constraint that forces ruthless prioritization. She can't do everything, so she must do only the highest leverage activities. Unlike executives who create wealth through maximizing activity, Oprah's model creates wealth through maximizing presence. She is fully engaged in fewer activities, producing higher quality decisions and deeper relationship capital with key individuals. This is the inverse of conventional wisdom about productive billionaires, but it reflects psychological reality. Divided attention produces mediocre outcomes. Mark Cuban represents another archetype, the information maximalist. Cuban begins his day at 6:30 a.m. by checking emails for 1 full hour before leaving bed. This appears inefficient until you understand the real habit. He treats email as the primary source of signal about what requires attention. He responds to hundreds of messages daily, maintaining an inbox under 20 unread items. This creates psychological clarity and prevents important information from being buried. Unlike executives who delegate email to assistants, Cuban manages his own communications, claiming assistants actually slow him down because they lack context to properly filter and prioritize. He reads multiple hours of news daily, continuously updating his mental model of market conditions. His ownership stake in hundreds of companies and investments across industries requires synthesizing vast amounts of information quickly. His habit isn't reading for entertainment, it's reading for pattern matching. When he reads about a pharmaceutical breakthrough, he's simultaneously thinking about his pharmaceutical investments, his healthcare AI investments, his medical device investments. He's connecting dots across domains, which creates insights that single-domain experts miss. Cuban's wealth, now approximately $5 billion, reflects this habit of extreme information acquisition and rapid pattern matching. But the habit came first. He built this habit as a young entrepreneur when he couldn't afford Bloomberg terminals or expensive research. He read everything he could access for free, trained his brain to synthesize information quickly, and leveraged that capability into increasingly sophisticated investments as his capital grew. The capability preceded the capital. The capital rewarded the capability. Finally, let's look at Ray Dalio, whose habits reveal the connection between meditation and wealth that most people miss entirely. Dalio, who built the world's largest hedge fund managing approximately $160 billion, begins every morning with 20 minutes of transcendental meditation, before Bloomberg, before markets, before any business communication. This isn't spiritual indulgence, it's signal processing. Dalio's entire investment philosophy, detailed in his book, Principles, rests on the ability to see patterns others miss, which requires cognitive clarity that most people never achieve. Meditation research from Neuroscience shows it increases activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, the brain region responsible for detecting conflicts between beliefs and evidence. Most people experience cognitive dissonance and resolve it by rejecting evidence that conflicts with their beliefs. Dalio's meditation habit strengthens the circuits that notice this conflict, allowing him to update his beliefs based on evidence rather than defending incorrect beliefs. In investing, this is the difference between billions and bankruptcy. His second daily habit is journaling and principle writing. After experiencing success or failure, he reflects deeply and writes down the principles revealed by that experience. Over decades, this created a written operating system that guides future decisions automatically, reducing the need for repeated deliberation on similar problems. His employees describe Bridgewater's culture as one of radical transparency, where all assumptions are questioned, a culture that flows directly from Dalio's personal habit of questioning his own thinking before implementing decisions. These billionaire case studies reveal a pattern. Wealth is not built through dramatic actions, but through daily architectures that compound over decades. Buffett's 67 years of simple living, Gates's 30 years of systematic reading and think weeks, Musk's 20 years of 5-minute time blocks, Bezos's 30 years of protecting peak cognitive hours, Oprah's 40 years of intention setting, Cuban's 30 years of information maximalism, Dalio's 50 years of meditation and principle writing. The consistency over decades is what creates the wealth, not the intensity of any single day. Now, if you're still with me, I know you're starting to see the architecture, but seeing it isn't enough. You need to audit your own habits against this model, and that requires a practice most people never do. Tracking your behavioral ROI. Let me show you exactly how to implement this. The most transformative micro-habit is not a new action but new awareness. Research from the Journal of Financial Planning shows that people who track their net worth monthly report significantly higher motivation to improve their finances across all dimensions. This single tracking habit, 15 minutes per month, acts as a feedback loop, creating accountability and making the psychological consequence of decisions visceral rather than abstract. Here's how to implement it. On the first of every month, open a spreadsheet. Create 2 columns, assets and liabilities. Under assets, list everything you own that has value: bank accounts, investment accounts, retirement accounts, real estate equity, vehicles, valuable possessions. Under liabilities, list everything you owe: mortgages, car loans, student loans, credit card debt, personal loans. Sum each column, subtract liabilities from assets. That's your net worth. Now track how it changes month over month. Most people avoid this practice because they're afraid of what they'll see. But ignorance doesn't change reality. It just prevents you from responding to reality. When you see your net worth declining despite working hard, that information forces a confrontation. Something in your behavior is consuming wealth faster than you're creating it. When you see your net worth growing, that information reinforces positive habits and motivates continued discipline. Over 80% of self-made millionaires maintain structured budgets and expense tracking, not because budgeting creates wealth directly, but because awareness creates choices. When you see that $200 weekly in discretionary spending equals $10,400 annually, which equals $312,000 over 30 years, compounding at 7% returns, the micro-behavior changes from unconscious to deliberate. That daily coffee becomes a visible trade. $5 today or $15,000 in 30 years. Not every trade is worth making. Sometimes the coffee is worth it, but you're making the trade consciously rather than unconsciously. The second audit involves tracking behavioral ROI across daily activities. Wealthy people ask before each activity, what is the return on this time investment? Not all returns are financial. Family time provides relationship capital. Health activities provide energy capital. Creative pursuits provide fulfillment capital. But the discipline of evaluating every 30-minute block against available alternatives prevents the slow degradation into low-value activities that characterizes financial stagnation. Here's a practical 7-day audit. For 1 week, document every activity in 30-minute blocks. Don't change your behavior, just observe it. At the end of each day, categorize each 30-minute block as either value-creating, value-consuming, or value-maintaining. Value-creating activities include income-producing work, skill development, education, strategic relationship building, and investing. Value-consuming activities include entertainment without intentional limit, social media scrolling, impulsive purchasing, and excessive news consumption. Value-maintaining activities include sleep, exercise, meal preparation, essential errands, and quality time with loved ones. Most people discover that 60 to 70% of waking time falls into the consumes or maintains category. Small reallocation of just 10% from consuming to creating generates extraordinary compounding over years. If you currently spend 2 hours daily on social media and entertainment, that's 14 hours weekly, 56 hours monthly, 672 hours annually. Reallocating just 1 hour daily, 7 hours weekly, toward learning, skill building, or side income generation creates 728 hours annually of value creation. Over 10 years, that's 7,280 hours. At even minimal return rates, that reallocation creates six-figure wealth differences. But here's the insight most people miss. Adding good habits rarely works if you don't first eliminate bad habits. Your attention and decision-making capacity are finite. Every habit requires mental energy to maintain. If you try to add meditation, exercise, reading, and investing habits without eliminating anything, you'll experience decision fatigue and quit everything. Wealthy individuals regularly eliminate low-value habits rather than merely adding aspirational ones. The practice is weekly elimination. Each week, identify one habit creating minimal value and eliminate it completely. Not reduce, eliminate. The binary choice removes temptation and decision fatigue. Examples of commonly eliminated habits among wealth builders: checking social media during work hours, replaced with intentional leisure time after work; mindless web browsing, replaced with purposeful reading; extended television watching, replaced with education or relationship time; attending meetings without clear outcomes, replaced with asynchronous communication or individual deep work. This differs from typical productivity advice because it focuses on subtraction rather than addition. The brain prefers complexity reduction. Each eliminated habit reduces decision fatigue for everything else. When Mark Cuban states he avoids unnecessary meetings entirely, he's not being productive. He's being minimalist. The habit is saying no rather than saying yes to better opportunities. Let me give you a concrete elimination framework. List every recurring activity you do weekly. Now ask 3 questions for each activity. First, does this activity move me toward my financial goals? Second, could I eliminate this activity without significant negative consequences? Third, what would I do with the recovered time? If an activity fails the first question and passes the second, it's a candidate for elimination. The third question determines whether elimination creates opportunity or just creates void. Example: you spend 1 hour daily watching news. Does this move you toward financial goals? No. Most news is reactive entertainment disguised as information. Could you eliminate it without significant consequences? Yes. Important information reaches you through other channels anyway. What would you do with recovered time? Spend 30 minutes learning about investing, 30 minutes on a side project. That's 7 hours weekly, 364 hours yearly of recovered time redirected toward wealth creation. Over a decade, that's 3,640 hours, equivalent to 1.8 full-time work years of additional value creation. Now here's where the real transformation happens, the identity shift that makes behavior automatic. The most powerful micro-habit is the identity declaration that precedes behavioral change. Rather than saying, "I will save more money," the practice is declaring, "I am a saver," or "I am an investor." Rather than, "I should exercise," the practice is declaring, "I am a healthy person." This semantic shift appears trivial, but it activates an entirely different neural network. When you embody a desired identity through small initial actions, saving $20, exercising once, the identity becomes self-reinforcing. Subsequent decisions filter through this identity lens. Would a person who is an investor make this purchase? Would a healthy person skip this workout? Over time, decisions migrate from conscious deliberation to automatic behavior matching the identity. This is why wealthy people report that their financial habits feel effortless. These habits have integrated into their identity so deeply that alternative behaviors feel inauthentic. The identity shift explains why some people maintain wealth-building habits through adversity, while others quit at first difficulty. Buffett maintains his 67-year commitment to simple living, not because he disciplines himself daily, but because living simply aligns with his identity as a disciplined investor. Quitting would require not just changing behavior, but denying his sense of self. This identity-based motivation is vastly stronger than goal-based motivation. Goals are external. Identity is internal. Goals can fail. Identity is who you are. Here's how to implement identity-based habits. First, decide the type of person you want to become, not the goal you want to achieve, the person you want to be. Do you want to be wealthy, or do you want to be the type of person who builds wealth? Do you want to lose weight, or do you want to be a healthy person? The distinction matters. Goals are temporary. Identity is permanent. Second, prove it to yourself with small wins. You can't simply declare an identity and have your brain accept it. Your brain requires evidence. If you want to become an investor, make one small investment. $20 in an index fund counts. Your brain now has evidence. I am a person who invests. If you want to become a reader, read for 10 minutes. Your brain now has evidence. I am a person who reads. The size of the action is less important than the consistency. Small actions repeated frequently build identity faster than large actions performed sporadically. Third, align your environment with your identity. If you're an investor, set up automatic transfers to your investment account. If you're a reader, put books on your nightstand and remove your phone charger from your bedroom. Your environment should make identity-aligned behaviors easy and identity-conflicting behaviors hard. Wealthy people understand this instinctively. They structure their lives to make wealth-building automatic and wealth-destroying difficult. Now let me show you the mathematics that make all of this undeniable. A concrete example of compound habit effects, saving an extra $100 monthly, achievable through roughly 5 micro-choices like skipping coffee twice weekly, eating lunch at home 3 days weekly, or canceling one unused subscription, generates $1.2 million over 30 years at 7% return. The 7% return assumes basic diversification through index funds. The habit isn't extraordinary investing, but consistent contribution. More remarkably, this assumes no increase in savings rate. If you increase your savings rate by just 1% annually, a modest behavioral shift like banking half of every raise, the 30-year outcome more than doubles. If you simultaneously invest these savings in slightly higher returning assets through learning, another micro-habit of reading about investing for 1 hour weekly, the outcome accelerates further. The mathematics reveal that wealth creation is not about extreme actions, but about persistent micro-actions compounding silently for years. Here's the mathematical reality that changes everything. At 7% returns, money doubles approximately every 10 years. $100 invested today becomes $200 in 10 years, $400 in 20 years, $800 in 30 years. But that's just $100. If you invest $100 monthly for 30 years, you're not just compounding $100. You're compounding 360 contributions, each compounding at different durations. The first contribution compounds for 30 years. The last contribution compounds for 1 month. The average contribution compounds for 15 years. This creates exponential growth that feels invisible until it suddenly becomes undeniable. The psychological insight. Dramatic results appear suddenly, but result from invisible daily habits. Someone who appears to suddenly become wealthy typically had been making micro-choices. No designer coffee, no luxury car, consistent investing, continuous learning. For 10 to 15 years before the wealth became visible. The newness is perception. The wealth is the result of invisible habit architecture, operating below the surface, until the compound effects emerge. Let me tell you about Ramesh Damani, the Indian stock market veteran with a net worth of approximately 363 crores, roughly 43 million US dollars. Despite this extraordinary wealth, he maintains the same car, house, and friend group he had decades earlier. His habit architecture remains constant, not because he lacks resources to change it, but because he understands that changing it would require adopting the daily habits of high spenders, which create wealth destruction rather than creation. This explains the paradox most people never understand. Increased income rarely creates increased wealth for most people because they simultaneously increase spending habits. The wealth opportunity from income increase dissipates through lifestyle expansion. A person earning $50,000 annually saves $5,000. They get promoted to $100,000 annually. They should now save $30,000 if they maintained their $50,000 lifestyle. But instead, they buy a luxury car, upgrade their apartment, eat at expensive restaurants, take international vacations. They now save $8,000, better than before, but nowhere near their potential. The percentage saved declined even as absolute dollars saved increased. In contrast, wealthy individuals who retain their habits despite income growth experience exponential wealth accumulation because the income streams continue, but the consumption stays constant. Each raise becomes investment capital rather than consumption capital. Buffett's income has increased by factors of thousands over his lifetime, but his consumption has increased by factors of perhaps 3 or 4. The gap, the ever-widening gap between income and consumption, creates wealth. Before we go further, I want you to do something right now. Pause this video and leave a comment telling me, what is the one habit you're eliminating this week? Not the habit you're adding, the habit you're eliminating. Because elimination creates space and space creates opportunity. I read every comment and I want to know what you're cutting out to make room for wealth building. Drop your answer below right now. And while you're down there, make sure you've hit that like button. We're building something special here. And your engagement tells the algorithm to show this content to more people who need these insights. Now let's talk about implementation, the 3-layer habit audit that transforms awareness into action. To begin reflecting your desired net worth in your actual net worth, you need a systematic process. Here it is. Layer 1 is awareness. Track your actual daily behavior for 1 week without judgment. Document every 30-minute block and honestly categorize it as value creating, value consuming, or value maintaining. Note emotional drivers for each activity. Were you bored, stressed, seeking social validation, genuinely interested? This creates a baseline understanding of current habit patterns without the self-deception that comes from relying on memory. Most people think they work productively for 6 hours daily. Time tracking reveals it's closer to 3 hours, with the rest consumed by email, meetings, interruptions, and transitions. Layer 2 is elimination. Identify one low-value habit and eliminate it completely for 2 weeks. Not reduce, eliminate. The binary choice removes temptation and decision fatigue. If you decide to reduce social media, you'll spend mental energy every day negotiating with yourself about how much is acceptable. If you eliminate it completely, there's no negotiation. The habit begins losing its neural pathway strength. After 2 weeks, the craving diminishes. This single elimination typically creates 2 to 5 hours weekly of recovered time. Layer 3 is replacement. Fill the recovered time with a single value-creating habit directly aligned with your wealth goal. Not multiple habits. That creates cognitive overload. Just one. Tracking net worth, learning about investing, building a skill that increases income, or developing a side income stream. Practice this replacement daily for 30 days, which is when habit formation begins showing measurable brain changes. The basal ganglia start encoding the new behavior as automatic. After 60 days, the habit feels natural. After 90 days, the habit is integrated into your identity. The 3-layer approach recognizes that willpower is limited, but habit replacement leverages neuroplasticity rather than relying purely on discipline. You're not fighting yourself. You're redirecting yourself toward automatically serving your wealth identity. The elimination removes the old neural pathway. The replacement builds a new neural pathway. Over time, the new pathway becomes the highway, and the old pathway becomes overgrown and inaccessible. Here's a real implementation example. You audit your week and discover you spend 90 minutes daily on social media, scrolling Instagram, checking Twitter, watching TikTok. That's 10.5 hours weekly. You categorize this as value consuming. It provides temporary entertainment, but no lasting value. The emotional driver is boredom during work breaks and evening downtime. For layer 2, you eliminate social media completely for 2 weeks. Delete the apps from your phone. Install a website blocker on your computer. Make it impossible to access without deliberate effort. The first 3 days are uncomfortable. You reach for your phone repeatedly from habit, but by day 7, the urge diminishes. By day 14, you rarely think about it. For layer 3, you replace that 90 minutes with 30 minutes of investment reading and 60 minutes of building a side business. You read 1 chapter of an investing book during morning coffee. You spend lunch break reading financial blogs. You spend the evening hour you used to scroll social media, building a freelance service, an e-commerce store, or a digital product. After 30 days, these new habits feel natural. After 90 days, they're automatic. After 1 year, you've read 30 investing books, built a side income stream generating $1,000 monthly, and developed expertise that increases your main income by 20%. The social media elimination created $12,000 in new annual income. That compounds to hundreds of thousands over a decade. This is the mechanism wealthy people use. They don't rely on discipline to resist temptation daily. They eliminate temptation entirely, then fill the void with value creation. The habits become automatic. The wealth becomes inevitable. Now I want to address the biggest objection I hear. This sounds exhausting. Living like Buffett or Musk or Gates sounds like torture. I don't want to wake up at 6 a.m., skip meals, work 5-minute time blocks, and track every 30-minute segment. I want to enjoy life, and here's my response. You're conflating 2 separate things. You're conflating habits with preferences. Wealthy people don't execute these habits through gritted-teeth discipline every day. They execute them because the habits align with their identity, and identity-aligned behavior feels natural. Buffett doesn't force himself to live in his old house. He genuinely prefers it. It's familiar, comfortable, and represents who he is. Musk doesn't force himself to work 100-hour weeks. He finds the work energizing because it aligns with his identity as someone solving impossible problems. Gates doesn't force himself to read 50 books yearly. He loves reading because it aligns with his identity as someone who learns continuously. The habits aren't sacrificed, they're expression of identity. Your habits need to align with your identity, not with someone else's identity. If you identify as someone who values experiences over possessions, your wealth-building habits will focus on minimizing possessions and maximizing experiences while saving aggressively. If you identify as someone who values security and stability, your wealth-building habits will focus on conservative investments and emergency funds. If you identify as someone who values impact and legacy, your wealth-building habits will focus on building businesses and foundations. The specific habits differ, but the principle is identical. Clarify your identity, then build habits that serve that identity. The exhaustion comes from trying to execute habits that conflict with your identity. If you identify as someone who values spontaneity, trying to maintain Bezos's structured schedule will feel like prison. If you identify as someone who values social connection, trying to maintain Buffett's isolation will feel like torture. The solution isn't forcing yourself into someone else's habits. It's clarifying your own identity and designing habits that serve it. Here's the truth most financial advice misses. There are multiple paths to wealth. Buffett's path is patience and compounding. Musk's path is innovation and intensity. Cuban's path is information and pattern matching. Oprah's path is presence and boundary setting. Gates's path is learning and strategic thinking. Dalio's path is principles and meditation. These paths are different, but they share common elements. Clarity of identity, consistency of habits, elimination of waste, and strategic allocation of attention and capital. Your path will be unique to you, but the mechanism is universal. Decide who you want to become. Prove it to yourself with small actions. Eliminate habits that conflict with that identity. Replace them with habits that serve that identity, and let compound effects transform small actions into extraordinary outcomes over years. Now let's address the final mirror, the mirror that shows not what you want to be, but what you're actually becoming through your current habits. Your current net worth is literally a reflection of your past decade of daily habits. This is not judgment. This is mathematics. If your net worth is below your desired level, The daily habits creating that outcome are already being performed. They're invisible to you because they're automatic, but they're operating every day, moving you toward or away from wealth. Conversely, to reach a higher net worth, you must begin performing the daily habits that create wealth, not someday, but today. Not when you earn more, not when you have more time, not when conditions are perfect. Today. Because the compound effect only works when the behavior is consistent over time. Starting tomorrow is starting never. Starting today is starting the compound clock. The wealthy understand this connection viscerally. They see their bank account as a direct reflection of their behavioral choices. When net worth declines, they don't blame the economy or bad luck. They audit their habits. When net worth increases, they don't celebrate as if they won the lottery. They recognize their habits are working and reinforce them further. This ownership mentality transforms wealth from something that happens to you into something you create through deliberate daily architecture. Here's what this looks like in practice. You check your net worth and discover it's stagnant despite earning good income. Most people respond with vague intentions. I should save more, I should invest better, I should spend less. These intentions fail because they're not connected to specific behaviors. Wealthy people respond differently. They audit expenses and discover $300 monthly on subscriptions they rarely use. They cancel them. They audit time and discover 10 hours weekly watching television. They eliminate it. They audit investments and discover high-fee funds. They switch to low-cost index funds. Each action is small. Each action is specific. Each action addresses a concrete habit, creating the stagnant outcome. Within 3 months, the net worth begins growing. Not because of dramatic changes, but because multiple small habit shifts compound into measurable results. The subscriptions saved create $3,600 annually. The television time redirected to side income creates $6,000 annually. The fee reduction increases returns by 0.5%, generating thousands in avoided losses over time. The combined effect is $10,000 plus annually of wealth creation that was previously being destroyed by unconscious habits. Over 1 decade, that $10,000 annual shift compounds to over $150,000 at 7% returns. Over 3 decades, it compounds to over $1 million. The shift from stagnant net worth to growing net worth wasn't a dramatic life overhaul. It was identifying 3 specific habits and changing them. This is the mechanism. This is the mirror. The most important insight I can give you is this. Consistency beats intensity every single time. The wealthiest individuals share one consistent trait. They execute the same daily rituals across decades. Not because the rituals are intrinsically pleasurable, but because the rituals reinforce the identity and beliefs that create wealth. Buffett's morning routine has remained virtually identical for over 60 years. Oprah's meditation and reading practice remains constant. Bezos's protection of morning hours remains unwavering. Gates's commitment to reading remains unshakable. Cuban's email and news consumption remains consistent. Dalio's meditation and journaling remains daily. This consistency is not obsession. It's the opposite of obsession. It's the freedom that comes from automating the right decisions, so mental energy remains available for complex strategic thinking, rather than depleting itself in repeated deliberation over basics. When you wake up and automatically execute your wealth-building routine without deciding whether to do it, you've preserved decision-making capacity for higher-value choices. When you automatically transfer money to investments without debating it monthly, you've preserved mental energy for strategic planning. The automation isn't rigidity, it's liberation. Your bank account will not change through dramatic actions undertaken sporadically. It will change through micro-habits performed consistently, generating compound returns that are invisible for years before becoming undeniable. The wealth mirror shows not who you want to be, but who your daily habits are already making you become. Change the habits, and the reflection inevitably changes. The mirror never lies. It only reflects what you have consistently created. So here's what I need you to do right now. This moment. Not after the video. Now. First, calculate your current net worth. Assets minus liabilities. Write it down. That number is your behavioral scorecard from the last decade. Second, Identify one habit consuming value in your life. Social media, streaming services, impulsive purchases, whatever it is. Commit to eliminating it for 2 weeks. Third, identify one habit creating value. Net worth tracking, investment learning, skill development, side income building. Commit to executing it daily for 30 days. That's it. 3 actions, 1 audit, 1 elimination, 1 replacement. These 3 actions executed consistently will transform your financial future more than any stock tip, any crypto investment, any get-rich-quick scheme, because they're changing the behavioral architecture that creates your net worth. And if you're serious about this transformation, if you're ready to stop wishing for wealth and start building the habits that create wealth, then you need to stay connected to this channel. We're just getting started. Next week, I'm breaking down the tax optimization strategies the ultra-wealthy use to legally shelter millions from taxation, strategies your accountant probably doesn't know because they're not operating at that level. The week after, we're diving into the psychology of risk tolerance and why most people's fear is costing them millions in missed returns. This is the insider knowledge that separates the wealthy from everyone else. So hit that subscribe button right now if you haven't already. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. And share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's stuck financially despite working hard. Someone who knows they're capable of more but doesn't understand the mechanism. Share this video with them. Because the algorithm rewards sharing, and sharing means we grow. And growth means I can bring you even more sophisticated insights. The Wealth Mirror is showing you exactly who you're becoming. The question is, do you have the courage to look honestly at the reflection? And more importantly, do you have the discipline to change the habits creating that reflection? Most people don't. They'll watch this video, feel inspired for a day, then return to the same habits that created their current reality. But you're different. You made it to the end of a 30-minute video on habit psychology and wealth creation. That tells me you're serious. That tells me you're ready. The wealthy became wealthy by seeing the mechanism everyone else ignores. You've seen it now. You understand neuroplasticity, compound effects, identity-based habits, behavioral ROI, and the 3-layer audit. You have the blueprint. The only question remaining is, will you use it? Your net worth 1 year from now, 5 years from now, 30 years from now is being determined by what you do in the next 30 minutes. Not what you plan to do, not what you want to do, what you actually do. Calculate your net worth. Eliminate one value-consuming habit. Commit to one value-creating habit. Do it now. Do it today. And watch the mirror reflection transform from who you were into who you're becoming. This is William Vanderbilt. Welcome to Premium Wealth Insights. Now get to work.